All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Richard Chapman, Cybersecurity Program Director for CyberNow Labs, and I'm here with Mike Meyers. Good to see you, sir.
Richard, always good to see you, my friend.
I'm happy to hear that because, with this face, like you said.
The face made for radio.
Exactly right. I think my voice is probably made for TV, but my face is made for radio. Is that?
No, I think your voice is like a sailor. It dies at sea.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much.
Always fun to tease you a little bit, Richard.
Well, listen, I wanted to spend a few minutes with you today. We're actually kind of getting towards the end of our existing cohort right now, and the focus is shifting from investigating and the logic of being an analyst and all of that to actually looking at getting jobs and doing interviews and so forth. And with you having such a broad knowledge when it comes to security plus type questions that might be asked in an interview, I kind of thought I might kind of pick your brain a little bit on some of the questions. I have what I feel are some of the most commonly asked security plus interview questions. And I figured I would throw them out there at you and kind of see what your thoughts are and go from there. How's that sound?
And folks, just so you know, Richard did send me out five. Sorry, those integers, man, they drive me crazy. 5 questions that we seem to run into in technical interviews. So this is something where your resume's passed muster, and this is the first time you're going to be talking to people, and they want to get some sense of where you're at. So the big thing I want to keep in mind here, Richard, is first of all, I completely agree with the 5 questions that you've provided me because I've seen all of these in technical interviews. Okay. And the other thing for me, though, you got to remember is that most of the time, I'm looking at these as somebody has a Security Plus certification and they're trying to get work. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of experience behind that. So this is not to be confused with like somebody coming out of the CyberNow Labs program, which would have, a lot more to their CV. So are we okay with that?
Yeah, no, perfectly. And I love that you said that because in all actuality, I think that's actually one of the things that we do here is to try to put some context to the knowledge, right? Sure. These questions are without actually doing some of the activities that you would do in a security operations center. Sometimes context is a little bit foggy. It's like, sure, you know what it means. You can recite what the answer would be on the exam question, but you kind of lose yourself a little bit in being able to talk about real life, real world stuff, right?
Right. No, that's a big deal. And circling that back to, not to steal away your subject line, but to bring that back into technical interviews, in particular, where people are doing more of the certification-based training, as opposed to a CyberNow Labs, experience workflow kind of thing. It really leans, the technical questions really have to, almost by definition, lean on more simplistic conceptual things. All right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you know what we ought to do, Richard? Some other time, I want to spin this around and I want to ask you, what are some of the questions that people run into in technical interviews who've come out of the CyberNow Labs program? I think it'd be an interesting compare and contrast. But for right now, let's start off. Some of these are pretty basic. So question number 1, what is the CIA Triad? Oh my goodness. The beginning of every security book ever written, right? So CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and arguably availability, depending on who you talk to. But I always say that those are the 3 things it stands for. Folks, this is the reason this often shows up in a technical interview. It's not that it's that technical of a question, but that it's a why are we here kind of statement. And people forget, why are we paying Richard all this money, to do this? And the reason is the CIA, which is confidentiality, integrity. So confidentiality, the people who should know about it. The people who don't know about it, don't know about it. Integrity, whatever data there is, I know it's good and not getting messed with in the background. And availability, which is something most security people forget. Now, you want to keep a file secure, Richard? Just lock it up on a thumb drive, put it in a concrete vault. It'll be safe. Exactly. But data needs also to be available. So the one thing I would recommend in a technical interview that you can throw in here is that instead of the CIA of security, a lot of security discussions these days have to go with compliance, laws, regulations, standards, and a lot of these bodies put the onus on me as the security guy to be able to do the PII or whatever it might be. So it goes from being the CIA of security to the CYA of security, which basically means you're making sure that you're in compliance with laws, rules, and regulations. And I'll let you guys look up what CYA stands for on your own. But that's a great one. So the second question you gave me is, go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry.
I was going to say they might not like it if we actually said what that one was.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
But we know what it is.
Yeah.
All right. I was going to say, I got the second question if you're ready. First off, I was also going to say, I would actually hate to interview you. It's probably like follow the bouncing ball, because you're so energetic and you're so, you're so invested in this knowledge and this information that you probably overwhelm me as an interviewer.
Oh, just go on. The one thing I do worry about when I interview people is no one should ever try to technobabble me. You know what I mean by technobabble? Especially in an interview where somebody's trying to show off a little bit. I say to people, I go, I only want to hear those 3 words that I always want to hear from another technician. Oh, Richard, tell me those 3 words. You know what those 3 words are? I don't know. I love it when people have the, nobody knows everything. You're not expected to. And I will sit there and just crush them tiny heads if they try to technobabble me and just leave them on the dirt. But no, in an interview, I will usually, at some point in a technical interview, I will intentionally create a line of questions to make the applicant say, I don't know, because I think it's such a powerful thing.
Well, and that's actually a soft skill that I talk about with analysts in the program. I'm like, it's okay to say I don't know to answer a question, but what you do want to do is have some sort of process that you would go through. You probably are doing that currently. If you don't know something, you will take certain steps. Like, easy answer, I'll Google the crud out of it, right? I'll go out and try to find whatever I can, talk to whoever I can to understand it better, so that next time that question pops up, I know the answer to that question. That's all about learning.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know, but I know how to find out the answer. Exactly. So that's what I always do. All right, Richard, Perfect. Give me another question, man. I'm ready.
Question number 2 is all about ports, and this is something I think comes up all the time. Is let me recite a port number, and you tell me what protocols on that port number, right? So that's one that I think a lot of people get tripped up on, because there's a long list of ports, right? And there's a long list of different protocols. But I like to think that there's a certain grouping of protocols and port numbers that are very common in cybersecurity. But what are your thoughts on those ports and protocols?
Of the 1,024 well-known ports, I'm pretty sure I could name 300 of them. But that's no great boast, Richard. It's because I do it. It's because I play with it. This is the other thing that frustrates me about people. I've been teaching certification training for, 30 some odd years now. And people are like, well, just give me a list of all the ports I need to memorize. I'm like, if you're in that kind of attitude, you're in the wrong business, okay?
Agreed.
We know these ports because we love them and we live them and we smell them. And it's like, like in the movie The Matrix, when he's looking at the Matrix in its raw form. Do you remember that movie? And it's just the green characters coming down. And he's like, I don't need to translate it. I just see, blondes, brunettes, redheads, how the movie goes. For me, that's really true with port numbers too. I can be firing up Wireshark, which is usually a tool that I turn to a lot of times on a new network that I'm trying to learn and love. And I can see all these port numbers scrolling by. And like, for example, what we got, this is the ones Richard gave me, guys. HTTP 80, HTTPS 443, FTP 21. I would add 20 in there, but that's me. SFTP, and that's just to pass a certification, and SSH, both using 22, Telnet 23, SMTP 25, POP3 110, RDP 3389, and DNS 53. Richard, I would say that's a good start. But I personally, if I ran into an interviewee who did not know all of these, that would raise some concern for me. Not only do I want them to know port numbers, I don't care that you can always look up a port number, I think, but I want to be able to talk about what SSH is. You understand what I'm saying? I want to be able to talk about, hold on, I'm gonna have to kill some animals downstairs. I think they're quiet now. We're okay. So I need you to tell me what SSH is and why do we use it and what does it look like and what are some of the tool sets we have to deal with it. And again, if you're coming into me and saying, well, Mike, how am I going to memorize all this stuff? My answer is do you have the passion for this industry? I assure you that Richard and I can just go through these, easily. Do you use like a IP port sniffer or something? I'm not saying in your sock, Richard. I'm saying just like here in your house. Like I have about 30 hosts in my house of one type or another, from desktop systems to IoTs to a electrical meter, believe it or not, is on my wireless network. Do you have Richard Chapman? I'm asking you, what would be the name of one or two tools that you might turn to do some basic research on your own home network?
Yeah, so actually Wireshark, the one you mentioned, is actually one that I've used in my home network multiple times, just because you can see so much information. You can actually go back and look at everything that's happening on all the different network layers and really dive into what is this network traffic that's going through my environment and what devices are here. So yeah, network, that's actually one. Network Miner is one that I've used in my virtual environments as well too. It's a little bit of a different PCAP type analysis tool, but you can also see port numbers and so forth in there as well too. And that's kind of a nice little tool as well.
Sure. Cool. I agree. Both of those tools are great.
Yeah. Awesome.
Port numbers are important.
Definitely a certain level of memorization, but also you really need to get to know them. You need to get to know what the protocols are, what they're used for, what the real world applications for those protocols and port numbers are, correct?
Yeah. And by the way, the list you gave me there is a bare minimum.
It
like
is.
I would add all of the IMAP and SMTP encoded port numbers, which are going to be different than 25 and 110. What else would I add? DHCP, probably, but it's a great start.
Definitely, yeah. There's so many different ones out there. And again, this was just to try to get a feel, so I appreciate your feedback on that. Question number 3. What can you tell me about TCP versus UDP traffic?
This is a classic technical interview question because it really is probing to make sure that you as the interviewer have a good understanding of a TCP versus UDP protocol unit, right? PDUs. And it's important because 98% of all the traffic on the internet is TCP. But there's a ton of traffic that's run under UDP, and I'm also going to throw in ICMP/IGMP, even though I know it's not a perfect fit, but to me it does. So I'm going to want to hear two things from them. Number one, I want to hear them tell me that TCP and UDP can handle multiple packets. That's the one thing I want to hear them say, unlike an ICMP, one ping only, right? I mean, it's just a single packet. But the second thing I want to hear is connection-oriented versus connectionless. Those are the things I want to hear. With TCP, we're going to do a 3-way handshake. We're going to get all connected together. With UDP, they just throw it out there and you count on the applications to make sure that data has been received. I'll actually use an analogy of me going into a bar. And sometimes you just go in the bar and you yell, "Bartender, get me a beer," right? And then you just hope the bartender remembers to get a beer. Or sometimes you actually walk up to the bar and you go, "Hello, bartender." And the bartender goes, "Hello" to you. And you're like, "I would like a beer." And the bartender goes, "I will get you a beer," right? So that's sort of my own little connectionless versus connection-oriented analogy I like to get in people's heads.
So in that analogy, the UDP is the first one. Hey, just give me a beer. You're literally just throwing it out there, hoping that it's received and something gets done with it. Whereas the second portion, you're actually making a connection. You're building a relationship in a certain way, right? So
absolutely,
that would be your TCP.
Absolutely,
Yeah, cool. I like that.
To me, that's the big difference between UDP versus TCP.
Yep, agree. And I do have to make note of the Sean Connery attempt there. It was all right. It was. I don't know if it was the best. Hunt for Red October, one of my favorite movies, so I caught that. Nimnoga.
There can only be one.
Oh, now
I'm playing a Spaniard with a British accent because I'm Sean Connery. He was in Highlander. Yes, come on.
Now we're going back to Highlander. I love it.
The original Highlander was Sean Connery and the guy whose name we'll never remember anymore.
I was going to say, only people.
Look, Richard, I got to tell you, if you want to work in IT, you better be pretty nerdy Here's a true story, okay? This really happened. I was trying to hire a new instructor. Two guys, they physically looked the same. Their resumes were basically identical, terrifyingly identical. And I didn't know how to pick one. I could only afford one. So here's what I did. You ready? I asked them both the same question. You ready? In the original Star Trek, okay? The original series, TOS, there was an episode where the hippies took over the Enterprise. Now, in that episode, they sang this one song a number of times. What was the name of the song? And sing as much of it for me as you can.
Oh my gosh.
Well, of course, both the guys knew it was Going Down to Eden, which was the name of the song, but only one guy was able to sing it all the way through. And
wow.
And you know what his name was? Richard.
Nice.
Richard worked for me for many years.
I was going to say, I know for a fact I've seen that episode as well, too. Stuff like that, I'm really bad when it comes to remembering names and artists of songs, but it comes on the radio and I can start singing along a lot of times. So yeah, anyways, you know, by the way, we are actually giving a lot of credence to this two bald nerds thing with this discussion.
Are we?
Yeah, we are. All right, last question. I know you're busy, guys, so I want to be able to actually, no, I take it back. There's two more questions, actually. Explain the three-way handshake, and then how does DNS work? And, you know, I almost feel like the DNS question could be its own episode because there's so many different ways you could talk about how does DNS work and how deep you can go on that question. So let's do.
We could have we could do a whole episode just on dynamic DNS. We could have a whole episode just on micro DNS. We could have a whole So we'll just do one more question then. Is that what we're hearing?
No. We can touch on the other one, but first off, let's do explain the three-way handshake. What would you make sure that an interviewer mentions here to help the interviewer or the interviewee?
Gotcha.
What? Let me start over on that part. Yeah, right.
I got you, Richard.
Start over. What should the interviewer say when talking about a three-way handshake so that the interviewer knows that the interviewee understands the three-way handshake?
Well, for me, I would definitely be doing it right after that TCP versus UDP question, because then my statement would be I would then say, this is all I'd have to say is, how does TCP make something connection oriented? And to be honest with you, so the three-way handshake is SYN, SYN-ACK, ACK, right? I need to look that up. I'm saying that off the top of my head. SYN, SYN-ACK, ACK, right? Okay. Yep. And so the idea here is that, and actually this part isn't that important to me. To me, number one, making sure they understand that clients initiate connections. I think that's a big one to get in their head. Yeah. And then number two, to make sure that this handshake acknowledges through all of the different flags that you see on a TCP packet, right? Because SYN, SYN-ACK, and ACK, those are actually flags within the PDU itself. And to have somebody just show me, preferably on a little ladder chart, how those three steps come together. So really all I want to see is the client initializing, the server coming back saying, yep, I'm here, and then the client coming back saying, let's go. So yeah. I'd be very happy with very high level answers for something like this. Remember, I'm thinking in terms of a entry level position here.
Exactly. And you could almost even, connect that yourself as the interviewee. When they ask you the question about TCP versus UDP, you almost know the next question coming is something probably about the three-way handshake. So you could even include that in your answer about the TCP, UDP, and it almost eliminates that question because you kind of expect that it's coming too.
So the other thing I would add is that after they answered this one, my next question would be give me another example of a handshake in the world of TCP IP. I mean, there's hundreds of them, right? I mean, a DHCP initial connection could be one, HTTPS connection could be one, SSH connection. All of these could arguably be a handshake, right? And I would just want to see their familiarity with those applications / protocols enough if they could come up with one off the top of their head. It would not be a deal breaker if they couldn't, but it's just, again, Richard, things like this, so many times I'm not necessarily looking for an exact answer. I'm looking for their enthusiasm. I'm looking for their passion. You know what I mean? I'm looking for them,
For sure.
even if they don't really understand something, I want to hear them say, I don't know. You can say to me, but I think that's fine. You can do that all day long. I can speculate that. Those are fine, but don't try to tell me what it is, because I know, and it's never a pretty situation to do that.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. So, all right, last one on the DNS. Again, not to go too terribly deep here, but even just a basic understanding, and I know that that's really saying a lot to say a basic understanding of DNS, but in an interview for somebody who is an entry level, what should they be able to refer to or talk about or understand here when it comes to the DNS question about how does the DNS work?
I want to make sure at an entry level that they're clear on exactly why it exists. Okay. And, basically the problem is the biggest problem with the internet is that it has to serve human beings, that the internet would be much more efficient if it wasn't for these, as Star Trek said, bags of mostly water, right? Remember that episode? Dude, you're going to have to, anyway, and I would want to hear them say that the whole reason DNS exists is because human beings are just awful at memorizing binary or octet numbering systems. And we usually tend to do better with something that sounds human being-ish, like cybernowlabs.com, right? Or, IBM.com or something like that. And that would be the first thing would be important. The next thing I'd want to hear technically, I'd want to hear them say the word forward lookup zone and reverse lookup zone, just to make sure we have some kind of basic understanding of that. And then the only other thing would be some of the DNS hierarchy, just to be able to show top level, secondary level, and so how those servers come into play. I would not expect most entry-level people to be able to go into a DNS server and do anything much worthwhile, but I would expect them to be able to first do no harm and, not being able to do silly things with tools to, empty out lookup zones or things like that. And again, it would be concept for me,
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, listen, like I said, I know on that question we could go a lot deeper, and I'm sure actually on most of these questions we could go quite a bit deeper. But I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me today to be able to kind of give some insight and some advice towards individuals going through the interview process and being able to relay that knowledge that they have both in the technical book sense and in the practical everyday usage sense. So your expertise is always appreciated.
Sure. And remember, Richard, the most important thing you could ever say in a technical interview is,
I don't know.
That's right. Absolutely. Because if I'm interviewing you, I will get you to a point where I will make you say that. So
the next question might be, should you say that I don't know with gusto or with a little bit of sheepish mentality?
With passion. You always like with passion. Like you just said the most interesting thing, Richard. I don't know about this, but I think I want to understand more about, RSA encryption, or whatever it might be. Yeah. Cool though. Richard, awesome. Once again, thanks, man. We'll see you on the next one, brother.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of the day. Talk to you soon.
Bye.